This might be a good example of a scenario where I'm multi-way contested and how to recover from a bad spot.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
spatula. So
Spatula.
yeah, because I was researching this faded dryad comp and with the dryad spat, it's really strong. I was like, okay,
Hmm.
I could maybe lean in that direction if the opportunity arises.
That makes sense.
The problem is there are already a bunch of players holding faded.
What I would recommend, and at this point in the game, if you can win streak early, that's like the best case scenario. So you just want to be playing around your items here. Uh, in this spot with an early glove drop with these items, I would be considering some type of 8E line. One thing that I want to double check is the stats on 8 Ghostly here. 8 Ghostly, very high average placement, right? So one thing you consider, because you have early fast start, this Ghostly crest right here, that is guaranteed 8 Ghostly, right? So that's one option that you consider, right? I just want to see what your decision here is.
Yeah. So so already eliminated that. I'm not streaking, so I didn't take that. And then basically I'm just thinking generic unified.
Okay, yeah, yeah. The first option with 8 Ghostly is probably your best bet because you already have a Ghostly spat and a glove, right? It's all context dependent, right? This being a spat start compared to other games where it's not a spat start, like the decisions are going to be vastly different. But the fact that one, you have the spat start means you're probably playing towards the spat.
Mhm.
Uh, that means that a lot of those trade specific augments are going to be a lot higher value than they typically are in other. So Call to Adventure here is actually another fantastic option because if you
Mm,
get the Story Weavers, right, because that's a spat you can make, then this augment is actually going to be very. I think 7 Story Weaver is actually like pretty strong, and if you can guarantee 7 Story Weaver without having to hit the Irelia, right? If I get Call to Adventure here and I can make a Story Weaver spat, I can hit the 7 Story Weaver. So that's a very strong option. The Ghostly is a very strong option. Obviously, like Unified is fine, but these are the situations where you like if you can recognize the high roll, then you play towards it, right? It's just
mm,
like, but yeah, you can take
okay.
Unified here. In general, Unified is too bad.
Yep. This is also where I get focused on the stats and like the ghostly emblem stats just wasn't good. But I guess
Mhm.
what you're really taking into consideration is you get two of them.
Yeah, yeah. You just have to like dig it a bit deeper, right? Like Ghostly Emblems is bad because the Ghostly comp is bad, right? Playing for 6 Ghostly is not particularly strong in the meta. But if you
Mhm.
go a bit deeper and you say, okay, what about 8 Ghostly? 8 Ghostly has what? It's a 3.6 average placement. That's like really good, right? For a non prismatic trade, very, very strong. So
Yeah.
if you see that, then you can be like, okay, I should probably play towards that, right?
Okay.
Um, that's like how do you interpret the data, right? And what stats are important to be looking for. But yeah, yeah. I mean, unified. It's not as if taking unified is like still that bad. But that's one of those situations where if you can recognize the high roll, you can just straight up get first.
So this is even a situation where I'm like, I could have played a stronger board with Nico,
Mm.
but I was like trying to make 10. So I'm like, is this
Yeah, I mean, it's not necessarily that bad to make 10
okay?
here. I think as long as you hold your faded pairs, if you're planning on playing for faded, then if you're holding your faded pairs, it's not that big.
Okay. And I should probably be putting them in a line to
Yeah, you
get
just need the
unified value.
unified value.
Someone slammed Dryad, someone slammed Faded, someone's going
A lot
Dragon
of
Lord.
definitely. Yeah.
And then two healthy was probably Kais. Or Kais, I forget if that was the separate Kaisa player or the Dryad player.
Yeah, I mean, so if somebody already slammed faded stats, it's probably you should probably be thinking about what else you can play. What I would
Hmm.
like once faded, one dryad, a lot of your units are going to be out of the pool. So you're most likely going to be, and if you're already in this sort of open core spot, you need to be thinking about what can you play that's potentially going to be tested. They're like too heavenly, right? So if we're thinking about the options here, you can still play faded, but it's going to be a bit coin flippy, right? And like, let's consider what the items are here, because if you have tier sword, glove, spat, right? Those are your components. It's actually going to be very hard to get into faded, right? Because you don't have any rot. So you're going to have to first sink a carousel to get the initial rot, right? And if I'm playing Syndra, I want to want more than one of those rods, right? So if I can't
Yeah.
get that off up
And need more
front,
tiers too.
yeah, I'm going to need more tiers. I'm going to need a bit more. Whereas if I try maybe play an AD line, some kind of AD line here, then these items make a lot more sense, right? Sword, glove, tier probably lean side of things because even if I slam the Shojin, I still have this dead glove, right?
So that'd probably lean towards like Ash with like porcelain emblem. Because like
Yeah,
Kaisa
Ash would
doesn't
be
really use an
good.
emblem well, right?
Yeah, Ash would be fine. Kaisa is a bit iffy, but at the end of the day, if you have to play Kaisa, you might play Kaisa. But Ash is a perfectly viable option, and it doesn't look like anybody in the lobby is really leaning towards playing Ash, right? If you have two
Mhm.
heavenlies, one guy is faded and one guy has Dryad, right? Like the Ash and Boker line is pretty wide open. And if you get
Mhm.
either Porcelain Spat or Mythic Spat, you have a really good option, right? Because those items both go very, very well on. So,
Okay.
that's probably the best option from this spot. Right? Because if you go for the faded here, you're essentially playing into other people, right? You're deciding to play into other people.
Mhm.
And it might end up going a bit poorly.
Yeah, so this kind of goes back to items and holding items, or sorry, the units that I'm holding. 'Cause I'm already kind of leaning faded with the units, but you're saying if I'm contested. So this is kind of the scenario that we are talking about, right? Like I'm losing a lot of HP, and that I'm most likely if I want to switch directions. And I guess to your point, if I'm uncontested Ash and I can identify that, then I can roll a bit on 3-2 to stabilize, find some
Yeah,
of the early
yeah.
cost units, especially since I'm not holding any of them, and then like roll on 4 or 5 or something after the other players have rolled.
Yeah, definitely. And the big thing, I mean, obviously, by taking tier here, you're sort of saying, okay, I kind of want to play Syndra, right? That's sort of like the direction that you're going in. But
Yeah.
that's the thing is like by this point in the game, you probably could have recognized, right? You can sort of figure out this is probably going to be not the safest play, and not even like the highest you play. Like it might end up really, really being because
Mhm.
if you're being tested on these units, then could end up going pretty poorly. Plus, like your just item wise, right? Just like think about how much you had to invest to get this tier off of carousel, right? Because you're still down an AP item, and if you want to make use of this spat, you're essentially gonna need a rod or a bell, right? So you have to go. If you
Mhm.
take rod or create a spat, then it's going to be very difficult to get AP items out.
Right.
Yeah, so like getting another glove here is it could be unlucky, but at the same time, it's like you're not too expected to hit the rod or the belt. So in this spot, you know, if you lean more towards playing AD, you're going to have a lot better of a time, right?
Yeah. So I'm basically committing to Syndra with the double adaptive. Well, I guess I don't have to commit to it, but yeah, with the gloves and sword, it feels bad.
Yeah, with the gloves and because like, if you're Syndra double adaptive, you probably want like either arcs or a decap, right? But it's going to take so long to that spot, right? So
Mhm.
here I mean, you probably take Pandora's would be my guess. I mean, you can also take New Recruit, which isn't bad, but if you don't take the Pandora's, what's going to happen is you're going to be down pretty significantly in terms of item economy. But if you do
Yeah.
take Pandora's, it's not like Pandora's is really the greatest prismatic augment. You're essentially going to be a little bit behind in terms of how hard you can cap your board compared to the rest of the lobby.
Mhm. I'm also thinking if I don't take Pandora's, I could just slam TG and that holds things over for a little bit, but my front line would just really suck.
Yeah, yeah. Let's just see what happens here. It's tight. Radiant is not the worst thing in the world. Buried treasures can be good, but in this spot, it's hard to say. Yeah, it's in
So
this
I need
spot, it's
to
a little bit
stabilize a
more
little bit.
expensive. Yeah, I mean, Shiv
Okay.
is pretty decent. Declaw is also pretty decent, I would say. Those
Yeah,
are
I was hoping I would get
primary
some kind of
options.
rod item to finish
Yeah,
off
yeah,
Syndra.
yeah.
But
I mean,
yeah,
it's not the worst thing in the world here to just take Shiv or Declaw, I think, because those are both
yeah.
pretty high value items. But yeah, I mean, like in this spot, right? Since you're being at least one way contested, maybe two-way contested, you really can't afford to roll it. It's like one of the things, it's like I was saying, right? Like if you're being contested on one of these 4 cost comps, rolling on level 6 and missing is essentially a death sentence, right?
Yeah.
You're just you're essentially screwed. So at this point, you're playing for level 8, and you just have to hope that you can hit, right? That's like
Mhm.
it's the end goal.
Yeah, I thought two-star Kindred would stabilize me more, but I guess I
The
don't
two
have
star
Five Faded and I
two star
don't
Kindred
have
is
Reaper.
all right. Are you currently pairing Kindred with? Is it Ari? Is it Kindred
Oh,
Ari?
I think
Or
I'm okay. So that was another question I had. I was lucky to get a spat off carousel, but I think I was just pairing Yasuo
oh
and
yeah, no. The other thing I would recommend, and this is actually a big thing, is like here you definitely need more damage.
mhm.
So I would probably pair Kindred with Ari, because right now, 4 faded, you're not getting any additional stats on Kindred. And
Yeah.
one, if you're losing, your primary objective should be to kill units. But two is just like this board does not have nearly enough damage, right? So I would definitely one Kindred should always be paired if it's like 3 faded, right? If that's your
Mhm.
primary carry, you need to have her paired. Otherwise, you're not going to get too much value out of the trade. And two is like I would go for the AP here just because if you're thinking you're going to be losing, your first goal should not be to have it take the front line, right? It should be how many units can I
Mhm.
kill before my team is dead, right?
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. And it seems like people are playing this comp differently as far as so I think Kurum is I thought he was going potentially Gnar reroll with the what was this called? The Freaky Friday?
The Freaky Friday.
But
Yeah.
I think and he has poor Dryad, so I was like, oh, maybe it's okay. He's not gonna play Syndra. And then later he declares.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the JG slam is a little bit something you probably have to be a bit scared of that.
Yeah.
So Fawn Slam is fine. Probably just pop that on a unit.
I've seen more people like pair Rush and Ari in
Yeah,
this
yeah,
like
that's a
Syndra
possibility.
board.
It's just like, you need damage from somewhere, right? If you're playing vertical faded, it's not like you're gonna get that much damage from Arcanist, right? 2 Arcanists is not too much, so pairing with Ari gives you the AP you need for Syndra. If you have enough AP, you can probably just pair Syndra with a different unit, but it just depends. I think it's really context dependent, I would say. Like in general, RA plus Thresh is okay, but there are some situations where it's not always the correct choice.
Okay. It's like in the past, I feel like when it was Aphelios was the kind of the main carry for Faded, it,
Mhm.
like it was almost like autopilot Yasuo Thresh early game and then Thresh set late game. And now it seems like people are experimenting more with what units to pair.
Yeah, yeah, it's experiment. I mean, one is like some of those traits have been nerfed, right? The Yasuo one is no longer are nearly as good as it used to be because
Hmm.
I think they nerfed it post on a certain patch. But the other thing is just straight up, if I'm playing for Syndra carry versus if I'm playing for Aphelios carry, those are two very different things, right? Just the main
Okay.
main thing. I'm not too sure about the Crown Guard slam. I think there's like an option there to go Gunblade, but more importantly, the sword is kind of dead with the Crown Guard slam.
Right.
That's one thing. Yeah, it's really about item economy and like what can you do with your items later. Like chain is a fairly flexible item. It might let you get into healing reduction if you really desperately need it. But the other thing is like if you slam crown guard, you're not going to have another Syndra item. It's the big thing. Unless
Okay.
triple check, yeah.
Would I not want to? Because I feel like Syndra want the double adaptive, and then I was just thinking the Radiant Shiv would just go on Syndra because
So
it's like 50 AP.
Radiant Shiv is it's a 50 AP, but it's still not like the greatest because it does it's what Radiant Shiv is giving you is essentially, you have the shred, it has some base stats. I think it's still not as much as like a decap at the end of the day, right?
Mm.
Because decap,
Because like, would you want Gunblade over Radiant Shiv on? Because then
yeah, I
Syndra's
would
like
still
not
go
dealing that much
for
damage, right?
Syndra is your main damage carry if you're playing for like double adaptive, right? So
Yeah, it's just
Gunblade,
she wouldn't
if
have
you're
any
doing
AP.
Gunblade, right, you can go Ari paired with Syndra. That's where your damage is
Mm,
going to come from, right?
mm.
But if you're just going shit like Radiant Shiv Syndra with double adaptive, that's like one is like no sustain, and two, like she doesn't even use the Shiv that well, right? Um, Outside of like just the base AP that you get from Shiv, like she's not going to be auto attacking that much, so the additional damage, the shred is not going to be applied that effectively. So in that sense, it's not as great. And like decap or gunblade, I think would in general be better. And you can put the radiant shiv on a different faded unit, maybe like the Ari or the kindred are both fine. And if you happen to find an Azir, go on Azir.
Okay. The other
Yeah,
reason I was slamming the Crown Guard is just because I was completely lacking
in frontline
frontline
items. Yeah,
items.
yeah. Well,
It-
you can think of like one gunblade is sort of like pseudo frontline, right? And this it
mhm.
heals your frontline, but two, you're gonna be able to get some like with this low HP, you're gonna be able to get, gargoyles, or even if you want to make a crown guard, you can get a crown guard again off of carousel, right? Um,
Mhm.
I think
Okay.
if you're going
Makes
like
sense.
solo frontline item, then gargoyles is probably your best bet. If that's the only if that's the only tank item you can get, yeah, like somewhat pseudo tank with a TG. But in this spot, like if you can't get the carry items, then it's gonna be that high of a cap.
Okay. As far as these augments go, I'm thinking big grab bag out of these three, just to
Yeah, big
hopefully
grab
get more
bag is
tank items.
probably, yeah, more tank and hopefully get your last Syndra item.
Okay. And then now, because I'm contested, I'm like, oh, reinforcement might be good.
Yeah, yeah, I
Uh,
think it wouldn't be that bad. Yeah,
and this
the
kind of
yeah.
goes back to what we were talking about around, okay, I'm not trying to maximize the cap. I just want to try to stabilize.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean reinforcement isn't too bad, I think. But I mean, what it comes down to is the items are still not that great, right? But yeah, we can see whichever decision you got. I think both aren't that bad. One or the other.
So do you take the any here?
Oh, I would not take the Annie there. You're
Okay.
essentially saying you can't 2-star Syndra anymore, right? Take the Annie. Um,
Right.
Plus, it doesn't fit that well on the board. Like, I mean, if you really want to, you can start pivoting towards some Invoker board instead. But with the double
Uh,
adaptive slam, you can, for example, put adaptive Annie and then get another
mhm.
adaptive on the Azir. But with 1-star Azir, it's a little bit awkward. Tad. It's a little bit awkward to get spot.
Okay. So you're really just focusing on Syndrome, not even
Hmm.
Nautilus.
Yeah,
At least
not
I
even
already have one
Nautilus.
Nautilus.
Yeah, not
Okay.
even Nautilus. Because those are not gonna stabilize you. They're not gonna win you the game. Or like maybe not even win you the game, but they're not gonna give you that many placement. If you're
Okay.
still
So then it
committed to
kind of
playing the
feels bad if I'm rolling down like 40 gold and I'm just skipping all the other forecasts until I find
well,
Syndra.
so the nice thing about Faded board is actually you don't really need that many board costs, right? There are only two that you can hit. So either you get Syndra 2, but your best option is still going, it's Syndra, or you can take the Ornn. The problem with taking the Annie here is that if you're not if you're committed to playing Faded, you can't really put this on your board on the end game. You might be able to. It's gonna be not. It's not gonna
So I think
fit that well.
in the Dryad version, I think this is a 5 faded 4 Dryad. I think
Yeah,
Annie
yeah,
fits,
but
but I
yeah,
guess
maybe
that's
on.
at 9.
Yeah, that's on 9, right? 5 Faded, 4 Dryad, and you can fit the Annie. But the problem here is that like who's going to be holding this double adaptive, right?
Right.
You can move them onto Azir, but at the end of the day, it's not going to work out that well. With this itemization, if you're strictly playing for the Syndra and you're not going for Syndra, then it's probably going to fall off. But we can see how it ends up going.
Okay.
TG there is fine. 4 Dryad, 5 Faded.
Also repeatedly not taking advantage of Unified. I
Oh yeah,
forgot I
yeah,
had that on there.
yeah. It's a understandable mistake. I think sometimes it's just easy to forget for some of those augments, best friends or whatever. Okay, so winning rounds, that's good. Got a Syndra.
Do you put like the Shiv on Azir?
Yeah, I would
Probably.
put the Shiv on his ear, and then maybe go for like a Gunblade off of that.
And then right now
Wow, this
it would
person's
be
also
Syndra RE pair.
yeah,
Get
Syndra
more
Ari would
damage.
be the recommendation there. You could also do Ari Thresh. I think it's that bad.
I wasn't sure whether to roll down because it seemed like I was stable. So I was like, oh, well, if I go 9, like I could add in, was it Horn and
Mhm.
I forget who else fits in.
So
I
so
replaced,
mhm.
oh, Set.
The thing about not rolling here, the big thing is it's just like a matter of how many upgrades you do have. So if Syndra is the only unit that you need to hit, then it's probably okay to not roll. But if you have like Crown Guard on a Thresh 1, right?
Yeah.
You're probably gonna want to hit at least the Thresh 2 before you can even consider going level.
Okay. I think I'm on the same page.
Mhm.
Yeah. Felt bad.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, what it comes down to here is this is just again like you're being contested, so hitting these units is going to always be like not the easiest thing in the world, right?
Yeah.
Um, so like this person, you have the Dryad person, they already have Orn 2. This person has an Orn 2. The Dryad person is probably also holding Orns. Um, so several people in the lobby probably already holding Syndra. So it's going to be very difficult to hit.
Yeah.
So the nice thing about taking the fours augment is that you can hit the Syndra 2 or
Mm.
the Orn 2, but at this point I think it's pretty much impossible. I don't know, maybe you can also high roll, but in this spot it's essentially going to be primarily just like not being able to hit Syndra.
Mm-hmm. How low would you have gone in gold? Like, let's say there was an Annie 2 or an Orn 2 as an option at like 20 gold left or 10 gold left. Like, I assume you'd take it with 10 gold left, but with 20 gold left, let's say, because I was
Um,
going to bleed out if I didn't stabilize.
yeah. In that case, you might have to. It never feels good though. Like
Yeah.
the moment if you're in a spot where you have to click the Annie, you're essentially already in a spot where you're going to bot 4, right? And that's again
Mhm.
like obviously it's not a great spot to be in, but I think the more important takeaway is how you could have avoided the spot in the first place, right?
Right.
And so here it's probably better to not roll just because I don't think it's realistic to hit the Sidra, and it's also not that realistic to hit the Ornn either, just because of how contested it is. So you might,
Oh.
although, yeah, I don't know. You might want to like just save goals until you're like 1 life, and then you can do the roll down.
That gives you like 1 or 2 extra rolls.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. I think I just bleed out here. Yeah. If I had a Syndra 2, it would have been
yeah,
like Syndra 1 somewhat stabilizes in stage 4 and 5.
yeah. It's relatively stable, I would say, but still, I think you're gonna fight. you fight any of these like top three people, I think it's pretty much a done deal.
Yeah. Actually, I probably should have taken the Syndra with the Runons there, huh?
I, I think it's fine to take the set here. Like the Runons is not worth much for the board. I like set. I think is if you think you
Yeah,
can
the
get the Cinder
Runon's
too,
not worth anything, but it's just if I could hit a Syndra too, maybe that could have stabilized me. I don't
yeah,
know.
potentially.
But yeah, I think it's pretty hopeless either way.
Honestly, a fifth from that spot is actually pretty. It's not too bad, but
So my big high level takeaways is on the 2-1 augment selection. I should have really, especially on Spatula Portal, I should be considering more trait specific lines, which also
yeah,
helps to
yeah,
differentiate from the rest of the lobby. So I'm less contested. And then two, once I saw that there was a faded and dryad player, I should have already been thinking like, how can I lean away from Syndra?
yeah,
Um,
and I think there should be somewhat easy for you, just because of like I think a big thing to think about is just like where your items are, what you're getting, and how
mhm,
you can play around the items. So I think, if I have this tier sword glove start, I would probably, my first instinct would to be, how can I play an 84 from here instead? Right.
mhm.
And it's it's always going to be a bit, even if Faded is a very like, even if Syndra is a very strong comp, if you're not in a great spot to play it, it's still not gonna get you a top four, right? So it's really worth considering, what is the best for you in the current moment. And if especially if it's a meta comp, you always have to be thinking, okay, who else in the lobby is trying to play it, right? If if you think there are going to be a decent chunk of the lobby playing the comp, then yeah, it's really not really worth it. Still hard forced to comp, right?
So here you'd be thinking like Shojin and then possibly Last Whisper with the club.
It depends. I think Hodge is decent if I'm trying to play for a melee carry. Like you have the Kiana there as an option to like hold those
Mhm,
items. And melee carries are still fine with the spat, right? Because you can make a heavenly spat. Obviously, there are other people in the lobby that also slammed heavenly, but it's not as if they're in a better spot than you are, right? Outside of the fact they have a cloak, but you have really good AD items, right? So you can always play for that. But again, yeah, I think your best outs here would have been either the Story Weaver or the Ghostly Augments, just because I think those are much stronger in this situation and pretty low variance because you're very likely to hit the specific units that you're going to need there. But yeah, I would
okay.
say like no matter how good of no matter how good you are as a player, making the decision here to like play into a contested comp is always going to be pretty high variance, right? And so if you know you're going to be contested, first thing is you're going to need like probably econ augments if you ever want to like outpace the other people, because from this spot your early game is not going to be stronger than theirs, right? But two, you have to consider how exactly your items gonna get to the spot where you need to be, right?
Mhm. Okay.
Yeah,
Any other like kind of big picture takeaways from this game?
I think I mean, honestly, I think going fifth is pretty good there. So the one thing is, again, if you had gotten the Syndra 2, I think you would have probably been better off than with the Annie. I'm not too sure if she did too much for it. Yeah, I think like that's the one thing. If you're committing to a comp, then you really have to like commit. And you could have went. You might have not been able to find a Syndra on that roll down, but I think you took the Annie with like still a decent amount of gold. And if that's the case, I could probably roll 10 more gold and see the same Annie, right? But I still
Mhm.
have the option to find the Syndra before that happens. And if that's happening, I'd much rather take Syndra 2, have take items on a Thresh 2, and then, play an Annie 1, then play the play the Annie 2, who's essentially just giving Invoker, right? And some front line.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, that's not really the most important thing. The most important thing is just what else can you play? What are some better options in this spot that will probably net you better placement on average, right?